All right, folks, we are looking at our Torah portion today, Ekev, and that is Deuteronomy 7:12 through 11:25. And we're gonna when we see this, we know what Moshe is doing right here. He's encouraging, but he's also challenging, and then he's also giving a warning. Yeah, he's doing all of those things because he's dealing specifically with the topic of Israel's right to access their inheritance. So we need to remember that. And when I'm talking about Israel's right to access their inheritance, we need to look at Galatians 3:29. It says, if you be Messiahs, then you are what? Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. So let's look at this word for a minute. And I know you may have done it before, but it's good to review it, right? It's good to review. So Ekev, and that's Bahaya, Ekev, Tishma'un. When you look at that, it's as a consequence of you listening to these laws. But when you look at this word Ekev, it has its root meaning from a kav. And you guys should know that because that's heal. And the minute we hear the word heal, where does your mind automatically go? It goes back to Yaakov, right? So when we look at to Yaakov, heal, it also means, though, to restrain or hold back. And it has this idea of restraining a heel while actually moving forward, taking a step forward, removing that thing that's an obstacle. But there's another interesting aspect about Yaakov because it can also mean backwards as it is baka, okay? So it's this idiom which is for the redemption. But when you keep both of these in mind, then you have this idea of a restraining and the concept of redemption together. Okay, why is that important? Put that on hold. I want you to remember the heel and everything else because I want us to go over the word a little bit more. Some would say would translate it as wherever or because, but it also means a consequence. And it can also infer to the end or the latter part of anything. Now, when we think of that, it sounds like this Ekev is going to be for you and I. Why? Because it's a result that it's a term that results due to certain actions, but it's for them, but it's for us as well. Okay? Because he's speaking to the generation at the end. He's speaking to this generation that's about to cross over. He's speaking to this generation that will be crossing over, you and I. Now, when we continue to look at that word hielakav, that root, it also means to circumvent, and it's the root of the name Yaakov, and which, due to Esau's accusation, as you've heard me say it over and over, has always been translated supplanter, but that's not what it is, because the root really shows one. When you look at Ekev, it really shows the one who follows at the heels, not a supplanter. Remember, we've got to stop listening to the words of the enemy. When the enemy calls you one thing or calls our patriarchs one thing, why would we listen to that voice? We shouldn't. So let's continue to look at this word Ekev and heal, because I want us to understand that we are supposed to be the one who follows too, right? So if we look at it, let's look at the scripture from Genesis 3:15, because here's that law I first mentioned. Adonai said, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and between her offspring. He will crush you. So he, the offspring, will crush you, the head, and you will strike the heel. Okay, now let's look at it. Here it says, the literal translation does not say the offspring will crush the serpent's head. It actually says the serpent is the head. Isn't that interesting? Because we interpret it differently all the time, because the serpent is going to continually strike at the heel of the offspring of the woman. Yeah, we've heard that before. We've experienced it before, right? But this serpent was condemned to permanently walk on his belly, and his revenge was to continually attack at the heel of the upright in order to bring them to his level. Now, you need to remember, we are supposed to be moved as people, as Hebrew. We are supposed to be moved by our spirit, which is our head, not the heel, okay, which is our flesh. So we also have that comparison. So we do not need to go down to the level of the enemy and be moved in that direction, because Yah condemned that serpent to walk that was permanent subjection to the will of God. And by proxy, the offspring of the serpent would want to destroy the walk of those who are upright. So are we going to face challenges? Yes, but we need to remember that we're victorious. So with all of this being said, let's also go back to the understanding that Yaakov is not the supplanter, nor is Yaakov the usurper. He is the one that follows at the heel. Now, you've heard me say that 3 times now. Follows at the heel. We are to follow at the heel. What heel? We are to follow in the footsteps. Well, what's the significance of that? Whose footsteps are we to follow in? In Hebrew, the letter Kaf indicates the palm of the hand, or actually the soles of the feet. And it's symbolic of possession. It's symbolic of ownership and authority and power and inheritance. And now think of that. Possession, authority, power, inheritance. Now, let's look at Deuteronomy 11:24. Every place whereon the soles of your feet shall tread shall be yours. I'm going to say that again. Every place whereon the soles of your feet shall tread shall be yours. That goes right along with that Kaf, that meaning of ownership, possession, authority, inheritance. Remember, this is about the people crossing over. It's about us crossing over to our inheritance. So when you look at this, Yaakov from his birth was identified as the one who walks in the footsteps, like Abraham and Isaac before him. He would be the one who would possess the inheritance and that covenant promise, because he would be the one who followed in the footsteps, in the pathways laid out before him. Now, when we interpret that wrong, we get a completely different meaning, and we lose the understanding of about our heel possessing the land as well. So when this also has a military aspect to it, because it describes the rear of an army. So Ekev, again, brings us back to this place, this word that speaks beyond those who are standing right there listening to Moshe at that very moment, because it infers or refers to also to those who are there at the end, speaking to our possession, everywhere our foot treads, that we have possession, we have authority, that we have an inheritance, but we've got to follow in his ways. We've got to follow his commands, because it's conditional, folks. Remember, there's a warning in this Torah portion as well. It's not passive. This term is not passive at all. It speaks with a warfare tone to it, that in order to truly assert this claim, there's a battle that we're going to have to go through, that there's a battle to be fought for this inheritance. When they went into the land, they had to fight. They already were declared the winner, but they had to go through the motion of fighting and taking ground, because there's action to their words. So in accessing the promises, it's directly connected to us taking our position and understanding our identity as the one who is not a supplanter, that Yaakov is not a supplanter. We're part of that inheritance of Abraham, that we are the ones that are to take possession and take our inheritance. And every place whereon our soles of our feet shall tread shall be ours in the name of Yeshua. And understand that we're not the ones that are supposed to retreat in this walk and in this life. We are the ones that are supposed to take back what the enemy has stolen. So no matter how much the enemy nips at our heels, no matter what kind of storm we're in, we are to understand who we are and our identity. Even in just a word of this Torah portion, it says, come on, folks, do you not understand that you are mine, that you're my possession, that you are to operate from your identity in me as the seed of Abraham. But we as his people have this tendency to do more retreating than taking ground, because we don't understand who we are, because we don't even understand who our patriarchs are. We identify with a usurper or a supplanter, a false identity. And we take that sort of thing on, thinking ourselves it's a false identity, and we make the enemy the one who causes us to retreat. No, he's the one that crawls on the ground, that will nip at our heels, but we already have the victory, and we've got to enforce it in a military term, in following his ways and understanding, because wherefore we are the ones who are victorious. Anyway, it's an encouragement, but it's also a warning in that when we walk around defeated and broken, are we truly understanding our identity? Are we truly taking back the ground the enemy has taken? Or are we letting the enemy take the ground that we have and take our identity and causing us to conform and become something different than what we're supposed to be? All right, so come back in, Mark.
All right. What are your thoughts on that, Mark?
I wonder how many people, if you just ask them randomly to name the patriarchs, how many of them would name John and Peter and Andrew and Paul the Apostle and, Jude as our patriarchs. When most people just literally don't even study out study out Torah and all of that. I hope we didn't lose them, but something's not right there. Anyway, the other thought was the identity, and so many of us, based on what you're talking about there, so many of us, just like not knowing who our patriarchs are, identify with the physical in life because we haven't let ourselves identify with the spiritual world. I mean, it's a thing out there where if you feed in physical all the time and everything that is the physical things you see about you, and that's how you maintain every day, then that's where you're going to go all the time in any instance, good or bad or what the deal is. That's where your thoughts are going to go. But if you identify with your walk with God, meaning a spiritual walk with God, then those things, those spiritual things become less dominant in your life, and the spiritual things and the way that you react and where your brain goes, that type of thing goes more towards the spiritual. So it's identifying not only physical things, but the spiritual things, that type of thing. That's my thoughts on that.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's cool. I was just thinking too, is how, have you ever heard that thought they're saying about a good offense is a
good defense is a good
defense is a good offense.
Best defense is a good offense.
Right. Okay. So think about this as what was Israel supposed to do when they went into the land? They weren't just to say go in there and then the enemy was going to come to them. They were to pursue their enemies and to drive them out of the land. To take that land and pursue them. And the problem was they went in and said, I want to get this land, and then they stopped. They didn't get all the enemy out of the land, and that was part of the problem that created issues and later on. But what Sandy you were talking about is, if the best offense or the best defense is a good offense. All right. So what if your offense is your defense?
It is.
So you're moving forward and to where your defense never has to hit the field because you are pressing forward so much. And because think about this over in the Brit Hadashah portion where it says, Yeshua is asking the question, who do people say that I am? And then Simon says that you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Yeshua answered and said to him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I also say to you that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my kahal, my assembly, my church, and the gates of Hades shall not overpower, and I will give you the keys of the kingdom. And whatever you shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." Sandy, you were talking about it's not that Jacob was the one that was grabbing the heel, the usurper, the deceiver, that type of thing of Esau, but rather he was pursuing. Esau was Jacob's enemy and has always been Jacob's enemy.
They've always been fighting for the land and the space.
So the proper offense is the best defense by staying on his heel, staying wherever that enemy is operating and working, is to stay on the heel so the enemy's plans cannot be fulfilled. And because there are purposes and plans of the enemy that he brings these actions and ministries against us, and yet what are we to do? We're supposed to be on our guard so much that we know the enemy's plans before he's able to even release them. Think about that. Those things that are revealed in the secret place so that we're not caught off guard. How many times do we find ourselves back on our heels because the enemy has blindsided us when perhaps the Father has been speaking to us all along? This is coming. Get on the proper advance to take out the enemy before he gets there. And yet, what do we see going on? Like, let's say what's going on in America right now. How much of the church, so to speak, is on their heels because they're being blindsided by things that the enemy is doing and manipulating in our world, right? Like the things that's going on with the policies of this administration and all of that. Show. Yeah, but think about how many of these things that, you know, we had things going for the protection of life. Now we were blindsided with corruption. And now we're having to go, okay, how do we regroup? Why are we having to regroup? Why weren't we on the offense originally? Why were we sitting on our laurels? Why were we sitting back on our heels? And so that the head of the enemy is snapping at us. And so yet we've been given the authority from the keys of the kingdom of heaven that's talking about the authority to rule and reign to where the enemy's plans can be thwarted. And how do we do that? And how do we walk that through? Well, there's a dimension there, walking in spirit and truth. We were talking about that, but it takes this time where how did Peter, how did he get that revelation? He said, "Flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven." Revelation must be through the Father, not by reading the headlines, not by looking at what the enemy's doing, not looking at all these bad things that are happening. It's through the revelation with the Father.
Okay, so the war plans happen in the war room.
The war plans happen in the war room. Yeah. Because do you think our military is sitting there looking at what's happening with China right now and saying, oh, what are we going to do? That all of a sudden they're doing all this stuff and they're such a big threat in the Pacific and blah, blah, blah. Or do you think they've game planned a lot of these scenarios out way in advance? What's Russia doing? Have they not game planned some of this stuff out? And because a good military is going to know their enemy, right?
Sometimes it seems like they haven't planned anything.
That's true too. Like, why are you going down that route? That's foolishness. Yeah, that's true too. So, or our enemy.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.
No one can come to you except through His love. Yeshua is the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to to you except through His blood. Torah, 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 Torah.